4:30 in the morning, came out here to record this story. This is an email that I got about 1 year ago today. I got it on February the 6th. What is today? February the 4th, so it's 2 days short of a year. It's one of the emails that got dumped in the wrong folder, and I'm still going back and grabbing these up and pulling them up. If you like good stories, you're in the right place and you found your people. And what I mean by that is you don't have to believe in Bigfoot. We don't care. Nobody cares if you believe in Bigfoot or Dogman or the Fae or any other of the cryptids. I have my doubts on some of those too. But this channel is about good stories. And people send me awesome stories, and that's what this channel is all about. It's all about a good story. So if you like good stories, intriguing stories, you found your people. Now, let's get into one of these really good stories. All right, here we go. This email from KB about a year ago, and it's a really good story. I live in Southwest Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains, and as a child, I ran wild through the fields and the woods. I would play in the woods without fear until the shadows would start to lengthen, and then I would leave the woods. Once dark, I would not even go near the edge of the woods. Growing up, we had some really bad neighbors, really wrong turn type neighbors. And one night, while laying in bed with the window open, I heard a crazy laughter coming down the mountainside. It passed through the house and continued down into the valley. I'm laying there terrified. So-and-so has gone crazy. As soon as the laughter fades, I hear what sounds like someone taking a hammer to a watermelon right outside my window. I refuse to look outside, and I have no idea what it was. I don't think I slept at all that night. Another weird incident in my life occurred in my early 20s. I was married at the time to my first husband, and there were 6 of us that would hang out together. It was my husband and myself, his brother and his girlfriend, and his best friend and his girlfriend. On this particular day, we were going to meet at one of the 2 local campgrounds in the National Forest to hang out around a campfire and drink and laugh and generally have a good time. We circled through one campground and we didn't see anyone. We headed further up the mountain to the other campground only to find that they were not there either. We sat for a few minutes deciding which campground to hang out at, waiting for them to show, when we heard a crashing coming towards us through the woods. We were on a knoll, and it was at dusk, so we couldn't see what was making the noise. It was coming closer and getting louder and more violent. We decided it might be best for us to leave, not knowing what it was. To get out of the campground, we had to go back to where the crashing was coming from. This campground was higher than the road, and as we made our way down, I looked behind us, and right as my husband braked, I thought I saw something. I even thought it was following us, and my husband put on the brakes again. I couldn't see the gravel road. All I could see was a furry torso. I yelled, "Something is following us." And so my husband floored it, and we go fishtailing down this gravel road in a souped-up Camaro with whatever this thing was right on our bumper. I don't remember how long it followed us, but my memory says 1 minute is the amount of time that it was right behind us. And the next minute, it was gone. I don't think we ever went back up there after dark. The next incident is one that really creeped me out. First, I'll give you a little history. The road I live on and grew up traveling follows a rather large creek and was once a railroad. The original road runs along the opposite side of the creek and crisscrosses back and forth across the creek and the current road. One section of the old road is called Red Banks because it's a red clay cliff that rises up from the creek, and the road runs along top of this clay bank and then it collapses a lot. Supposedly, during the 50s, a man ran his wife off the road in her car at this spot, and her body was never recovered. My brother claims that on certain nights you can hear her scream. I always thought it was a legend until one day during a break at the factory I worked at, an elderly man walked up to me and commented that he heard I was from so-and-so county and proceeded to tell me about his daughter being murdered by her husband at Red Banks in the 50s. This was the late 80s or early 90s. Jump ahead to about 6 years ago, and this road is closed to traffic because the bank has collapsed again, taking half the road with it, so my son and I decided that it was a good place to take walks. The closed section is surrounded by woods on both sides, and there are no houses. On this particular day, I decided to walk by myself. I passed the last of the houses and I slipped through the barriers. On one side was thick brush, and then on the other side was open woods. The road curves at the brush and slopes uphill to run between the clay bank and the woods. As I cleared the brush, my sudden appearance startled something and it took off running up the hill, but I didn't see anything. There was no movement, not even a leaf kicking up, but I could track it by its footfalls as it ran up the hill through the dry leaves with a crunch, crunch, crunch. It was a two-legged run. So I was standing there frantically searching for any movement, and I saw none. The hair rose up on the back of my neck, and I got goosebumps. Needless to say, I turned left, and I never walked through there again. Not long after that, we moved about 3 miles further up the road to an area that's more remote. The house is surrounded on all sides by mountains. The house literally sits in a valley. You can turn a full circle and see nothing but woods towering over the house. One day, my youngest son and I had gone to visit my parents and stayed past dark. We parked at the garage, which is about 50 feet from the house and closer to the road and the creek. When we exited the car, we could hear crashing in the woods on the other side of the road, and I stopped to see if any deer would appear. The crashing got louder and you could hear tree branches cracking. I remember thinking, okay, that's not a deer, maybe it's a bear. The longer we stood there, the more violent the sounds became, and I realized that whatever it was going in circles, and I thought that if it was a bear, it's one pissed off bear, and I immediately got a mental image of a Bigfoot. I looked at my son and I commented that maybe we shouldn't just stand there, and he took off running and he left me. I yelled for him, wait for me, and I took off after him. On another day, unbeknownst to me, my older son left the bathroom curtain and window open from his trying to catch a spotty cell signal, and the sun was going down. The bathroom sat at the end of a small hall, and as I popped around the corner into the hall, I saw a face staring back at me through the window screen. The window is 10 to 12 feet off the ground. Then I heard bangs on the house, and the windows on the enclosed back porch sounded like hands slapping them, and then we heard tree knocks in the distance. Woohoos on the real quiet nights, and there are a lot of oddities with the trees and the woods around the house. Last year, my oldest son and his girlfriend claimed to see something huge with eye shine across the road from the garage on the creek. I haven't seen a Bigfoot full on, and I rather hope I don't, because if I do, I may never go in the woods again. KB, that's a great story. It's a lot of good circumstantial or anecdotal evidence that most of us get. And I appreciate the way you wrote the story. It's real easy to read. And just thank you so much for sending it to me. I appreciate you. Here's a cool little story from Leslie. I also got this email about a year ago. Here's what she writes. She says, this incident occurred in central Pennsylvania in Huntington County back in the early 1970s when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. My father's family owned a hunting cottage about 40 miles from our home. All the men on my father's side of the family were avid deer hunters. My mother and my grandmother would pick up my sister and I after school on Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and we would head to the cottage. We would stop on the way to pick up groceries for the Thanksgiving holiday and for the days that we were to spend at the cottage. My father and all the men would come in later after they got off work. The cottage was located in a remote area in the mountains. We would arrive and unpack the car and get ourselves settled in. We had plenty of space for everyone. My grandfather would bring boxes of apples he got from a few trees in his yard at home. My sister and I would help him cut the apples up in halves and quarters, and we would throw them out in the front yard of the cottage to try to attract deer. After dark, my sister and I would take turns turning on the flashlight to shine it on the front yard where the apples were to see if any deer came to snack on the apples. When deer were seen, everyone would come to the window to see. We would count them, note the sizes, and if there were any bucks in the group. One evening, the adults were having an exciting game of cards. It was my turn to turn on the flashlight to look for deer in the front yard. I turned it on, and I didn't see any deer. I shined the light on the tree, on the ground around it, and on the apples, and I didn't see anything. I leaned into the window and I shined the flashlight over into the tree line as far as I could. Something caught my eye as I panned the light. I moved the light back to the spot I had passed a second before, and I stopped. I looked and I looked. Something seemed different. To me, it looked like I was seeing a man standing in the tree line facing me. I could see a body and I could see a face mixed in with the smaller tree trunks along the edge of the tree line. I was 6 or 7 and I was too young and dumb to be alarmed. The adults were laughing and playing poker and talking loudly, and I finally casually said, "Oh, there's a man down in the yard by the trees." Immediately, all the adult fun stopped. My father, my uncle, and my grandfather all jumped up from the table and they grabbed their rifles. I was a bit startled by them moving so quickly and all grabbing their guns. My dad came to the window beside me to look out, and my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother all hovered around the window trying to see out. My uncle opened the front door and ran into the front balcony, and my grandfather took his rifle and ran to the basement where a door led out into the front yard area. My mother grabbed the flashlight and shined it all over the yard. My father asked me again and again, what did I see? Was I sure that I saw a man? I was scared that I was in some kind of trouble because I'd never expected everyone to bounce to attention like that. I stammered out, "I saw him standing right there in the tree line." We had neighbors in the area, but they were a quarter mile away. No sane person would have been roaming through the woods at night with the impending hunting season coming on. A good recipe for getting shot, I'll tell you. Nothing was there as the light shined all over the yard. My grandfather went out into the yard from the basement and looked all around, but he didn't see or hear anything, and he finally came back in. They decided that I just saw some tree trunks in the light of the flashlight, and it resembled a person. I managed to squeak out in a scared voice that I didn't understand why they all grabbed guns when I just saw a man. My uncle said that no one should be out there in the woods at night sneaking around our cottage. If they were, they didn't have any good intentions. I had never heard any weird sounds or any of my family talking about anything strange in those woods. I don't think I had ever even heard of Bigfoot then. I don't remember anyone ever talking about the incident again after that. They just assumed I somehow made the trees into a shape of a person. It always stuck with me, though. I'm now 52 years old. Now that I've read so much about Bigfoot and listened to so many podcasts, I wonder if that's what I saw that night. I will never know for sure. Thank you for reading my story. Leslie, you're welcome for reading your story. Thank you for writing such a good story and sharing that encounter. I think it was great. Who knows? You could have mistaken some trees for a man. That could have been true. I mean, you're a little girl, but probably not. Probably not. You probably saw something. You know, y'all weren't up there all the time, and here's a bunch of noise and people there, and maybe these things were just coming close to check it out and see what was going on. But like you said, we may never know for sure. At any rate, this was a great story, Leslie, and I sure appreciate you. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this video. It's about all I had time to record. I got to get to work here. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.